everyone. Doc T here with another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. I'm so grateful that you're here joining me, and I want to thank you because you picked a really great one to listen to. Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Jenny Susser. She is a sports and performance psychologist, which is really interesting because whenever she and I get together, we always talk about the horse's brain, the human brain, and how they interact. And today's discussion is exactly about that. But while we spend a lot of time on the human part of it, we also try to tie it together to how we could communicate a little bit better with a horse. She is really brilliant at discussing the anatomy and how it works in the humans and in the horses. So she compares the two. And after today's podcast, you're going to have a better understanding, I think, of how you can connect a little bit better with your horse and overcome some of your fears and doubts and worries with your horses. All right, so please join me and welcome Dr. Jenny Susser. And her website is drjenny.com. That's drjenny.com. Thanks.
Got it.
Well, hello, Dr. Jenny. Everybody, this is Dr. Jenny.
Hello, Dr. Jeff.
Dr. Jenny Susser, who is a psychologist. And I'm going to read directly from the dictionary because I don't want to screw this up. The scientific study of the human mind and its functions, especially those affecting behavior in a given context. And Dr. Jenny is a horseman, horsewoman, horse person, who cares, lives with horses, loves horses, and she helps train athletes. She's also a friend. She's a swimmer, so was I. I used to do butterfly. Loved competitive swimming a long time ago. And she was very good at it, reaching Olympic, competing in Olympic trials in 1988. And she's done so many things with horses, helping people understand themselves and get over the hump and, that block that we all have just before we're going to compete. And then everything falls apart because we sabotage ourselves. The reason Dr. Jenny and I love talking with each other is we keep asking, so how does a horse brain work? We don't have an answer. We've got some ideas and we want to talk about them today. So Dr. Jenny, thanks for joining me at the podcast of the Horses Advocate.
Hey,
what you got for us? Me. Yeah, what do you got for us? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm listening. About myself. Well, it's funny, when I hear people call me a horse person, I mean, technically I am, I guess, because my relationship to horses is non-competitive and really sort of different from the norm. Like I have 3 personal horses. I love them. One I ride, 2 are retired because I keep my horses forever, as you know, having been in our barn. But I it's always interesting to me that as soon as I think about myself as a horse person, I kind of have to codify it because I don't compete. And then I kind of catch myself. I'm fascinated by lots of different things. And I was one of those little girls that, came out of the womb cantering and trotting, one of those kids that trotted over everything and jump the lines in the sidewalk and all that kind of stuff. So it's been I've loved horses all of my life, and to have them has been a super cool realization of that childhood dream. And I think when I started, I really started my life with horses late in life, in my early 30s. I rode when I was a kid for a while and then didn't see or touch a horse for 20 years when I moved to Southern California. And then when I got back into it, I was finishing my graduate school work in psychology and was like, wow, this is really fascinating. And because my partner was so advanced and so excellent at horses, I felt like I had to get good at it really fast. And so started studying and stumbled upon natural horsemanship and really started to think about, okay, how do we do this in a way that might expand our consciousness instead of helping us just stay stuck in the same jam. and I think that coming from all those other sports, I really looked at the horse sport world differently because, 20 years ago when I got involved in equestrian sport, the technology with regards to being competitive in the way and treating our horses like athletes was really far behind. We have caught up quite a lot in the last 20 years that I've watched it. But I was really stunned by the lack of of professional and sort of competitive relationship beyond, did I win? So that's sort of where my horse world started.
Let me think. You said something about these people getting stuck and the horses helping them get unstuck. Is that what you said? I'm not very good at listening. I try to, but my brain races too fast.
You're too busy thinking. You're
Yeah.
too busy thinking. Well, one of the things that I noticed when I got involved in the horse world was that people really didn't like, especially in the competitive world. I entered the competitive dressage world. So definitely English, mostly dressage for the first decade. I really didn't traffic into any other disciplines initially. And the way that we relate to dressage, or did 20 years ago related to dressage, was like people didn't know how or why they warm up a horse. It was just sort of, like the first segment of your ride was a warm up, and then there was this, and then there was you put your horse in the stall. I couldn't believe that people didn't warm down their horses. Like the warm up arena was never filled at the end of a test. It was always filled at the beginning. People would get off their horse. Their horse's sides are going like this after 6 minutes of squats, which is basically what a dressage test is for a horse's body. And then they toss them in the stall and can't figure out why the horse can't move the next day. And just like the lack of understanding of that, I thought, well, this is really interesting how the advances of technology hasn't caught on here. And so people are, we're hampered by different things in performance. And I'm always looking for, okay, where's the lowest hanging fruit to pick if you're trying to improve performance, right? Like, why do we go for the top of the tree? We don't need the star on the Christmas tree today. Let's get the lowest hanging fruit that we can and work there, because then you get these improvements that then you can continuously build upon. And so in terms of being competitive, people didn't relate to their horses as athletes, and they for sure didn't relate to themselves as athletes. And then that sort of led me, once I got involved with natural horsemanship and trying to understand horse psychology, then it was about, well, what's going on in the horses? Then I started to learn about the human brain, and then I started to learn about the horse brain, and I was like, holy cow, no wonder we're such a mess.
Well, that I see horses all over the country, and I see these people struggling to connect with their horses. And I effortlessly go into a horse that I've never seen before and connect, and the horse just stands there, opens their mouth, says, sure, go ahead. Or they start to say, hey, hold on, you've seen it. And if somebody put a gun to my head and said, okay, teach me how to do that, I'd be like stuck. It seems to me like the problem lies in the person more than the horse. And and I've trained myself.
I always say, yeah, you have trained, and I will say, I'll tell this story. I'm not sure how Meta found you, but the first time you came to our barn and you worked on her FEI horse, who was the hands down still 20 years later the most challenging horse I've ever met. And I mean, we couldn't even trank him at that point because he had one bad stick from a vet who wasn't, I don't know, careful enough or patient enough. And then so he couldn't be trained. And you just took your time. And the thing that I thought was really amazing about how you connected with him was that I think the first thing is that your agenda was very pure, right? Like your agenda was, I'm here to help you, pal. I'm here to get in there, see if there's any pain, if there's anything in there that's causing you trouble. And it was so pure, like
Mm.
when we go in there to get him and turn him out or brush him or groom him or put him on the trailer, there's always this energetic agenda that really differs. And when you see another being, another sentient being all the time, we start to relate to those things and predict them and anticipate them. But that was the first thing that was really cool. The second thing that I thought was really cool was how much time you spent in observation, which
Mm.
I don't think we do. And I'm not even sure you know that you do that. But you look at a horse and you watch, and because you're much more of a clean slate than an owner or a groom or a farrier that sees them with great frequency, you don't walk in the stall or into the field with all of those preconceived notions or already set up template for how he's going to behave and what he's going to do. And so your sympathetic nervous system doesn't get triggered. You don't emit a different type of frequency based on fear or anxiety or tension or worry. And I think that, horses being as sensitive to energy as they are, that's how one of the ways that I think I watch you connect with animals. I work with a lot of adult amateur women in the English world, and they have so much junk in the trunk, like they walk into the horse's stall with a backpack full of rocks, like just so weighed down all the time that it becomes increasingly difficult to be themselves and then find that piece of their horse.
Do you know if there's a formula? If somebody said to you, gee, I'd like to do that with my horse starting tomorrow morning, is there a formula? Is there steps? How do you get a person
Sure.
in the right frame of mind, get that energy right?
Well, it's work, which is why most of us
Mm.
don't do it. Why most people don't do it
Yeah.
is because to get your mind right, it takes preparation. And most of us, when we engage with our horses, we're on a time schedule, like, okay, I've got an hour. I'm going to the barn. I've got an hour. So I got stuff to do. We got to get this done, Foofy. So
Yep.
please comply, or I'm going to make you comply. Like you see that the most when you watch people trailer load. They just get in such a hurry and they forget about time as an element for sympathetic versus parasympathetic. So when we rush, we waste. When we rush, we trigger our sympathetic nervous system. So most people know this, have heard something about this right now. Yeah. I was going to say, explain the sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah. Come on.
So so we have a couple different nervous systems in the body of a sentient of a mammal, right? A sentient being is a mammal. The difference between sentient beings, mammals, and non-mammals is the elevation of the brain function, right? So there's pretty much reptile and then mammal. Reptiles only have one layer of brain, and then all mammals have 3 layers, with humans having this highly developed or much more formulated frontal lobe 3rd layer of brain. But that midbrain, the limbic system, is what really takes us apart. So the sympathetic nervous system, so there's the central nervous system, which is like you touch your finger and you feel it, you put your hand on the stove and it's hot, right? Like that's our central nervous system. But our autonomic nervous system is part of our limbic brain, and it has 2 branches: the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, and they are meant to operate like a seesaw. Like if you imagine when you're a kid playing on the playground, the teeter-totter, the seesaw, like one goes up and by definition the other goes down, and when the other one goes down, the other one goes up, right? So they're meant to offset each other. Yes. Everything, you could trace everything, every system, everything in life down to that, right? What goes up must come down. You breathe in, you breathe out. You're hot, you're cold, you're hungry, you're sated. It's endless. Okay. And so our autonomic nervous system is the piece of our brain that we have no conscious connection to, but it modulates all these different things for us, keeps us breathing, keeps our heart beating. Well, there's important stuff, important things. But the sympathetic nervous system is everybody's heard of our fight or flight And when the sympathetic nervous system is triggered, it really is a survival mechanism. So whether you're a dog, a cat, a horse, a donkey, a squirrel, a human, when your sympathetic nervous system goes off, all bets are off and it becomes about survival. And we do things automatically without thinking and in the name of the game, which is to survive. However, human beings get triggered all the time. I love to laugh and say, the sympathetic nervous system is just triggered by a threat, any threat. The threat used to be a saber-toothed tiger in the tree, and now it's an email with all caps in the subject line.
Or mom's
Right,
apple
so
pie. Don't forget,
anything-
mom's apple pie is a good trigger for me. They can be good and bad, right?
For your sympathetic nervous system?
I don't know. I think I'll eat.
So, right?
Yeah.
So
Survival.
when we're in that state, when we're in that survival threat, and you can have like full threat, you can have moderate threat. I mean, it's kind of the same chemicals. It's just how much get poured into the system. When you're in that chemical composition, like learning does not occur. You don't have higher order emotions or cognitions like generosity, curiosity, connection. Your horse isn't seeking a connection with you if he thinks you're going to kill him and eat him. It's not going to happen, right? And then conversely, the parasympathetic nervous system is the branch that's called rest or digest, right? And that's the part where we're supposed to, kick in and relax, and it lowers our systems, lowers our blood pressure, increases our heart rate variability, which is the space between heartbeats, which is an indicator of recovery and health. And if you were like after a meal, when you're sitting around and your stomach starts to gurgle, and it's not hunger gurgling, but it's relaxation gurgling, that's your parasympathetic nervous system coming in and going, all right, let's rest, let's digest. The digestion part is why at horse shows, when you have threat and you're nervous, the line at the porta potty is so long, right? Because the blood leaves your internal organs to go to your fight or flight muscles, and then you have to run to the bathroom.
Wow.
So,
gosh, now I know.
Now you know. I know that was maybe an overshare, but but I think that we spend way too much time in that sympathetic branch in general, but especially around our horses, because for many, many horse owners, they're scared of their horses. And if you're in that section of your brain, or those chemicals are swirling in your body, performance just plummets, tanks, memory is hard to consolidate. All those things, it just really disables the human brain in a very secret way.
Fear will do that, whether you're driving your car on the interstate or riding your horse alone or in a crowd in competition. Fear is a crippler. And how people overcome fear is an art that I assume you study, because it's the subconscious. It's like, no, I'm not scared. Yes, you are. Because everything about you is saying you are. Your mouth may say I'm not, but everything else is. And the horse senses that so much. So I love to go to fear.
Well,
go ahead.
We started this with like, what could a person do to get themselves in a better headspace before walking into their horse's stall, right? So that they could be a little bit more of their authentic self, so that they could seek that connection. They could be more in parasympathetic instead of sympathetic. And really what it is it's creating, first of all, you have to have the self-awareness to identify the state that you're in. Right. And so whatever that is, for a lot of people, that's meditation, relaxation. Some people it's yoga, some people it's exercise. Is it moving your body? Is it, you need to do a little bit of everything to be able to have that, like, okay, where am I? What state am I in entering this whatever it is, my engagement with my horse? So for people who are really nervous, if they don't own their barn or whatever their travel is defined as on the way to their time with their horse, I will have them go through a checklist of what's my state? What's the state of the state? And where am I at? And so there's a series of things that you can do to raise your self-awareness to be more connected to where your body and your brain are as you're getting ready to go and engage with your horse, right? So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is once you figure out where you're at, how do you get to the right side of that, the correct side of that? How do you get to a place that's really powerful? So then again, that's a training system, right? Because I can't even tell you how many trainers tell their riders to either relax or be confident, and it has zero effect because those are not tools or skills that are sharp or strong for that particular rider. So you have to, once you identify what it is you need to be, then you have to go to work to train that mechanism to be on call, right? Breathing as a relaxation tool only works if you train it. We breathe all the time, right? The example I use is we walk all the time. Could you walk a marathon today?
No.
No. You'd have to train your walking to walk a marathon. So yes, we breathe all the time, but you have to train your breath to have it be a powerful relaxation tool. So yes, you can create a system. I have a system you can create, and you can develop a system for how to become in a better state, in a better awareness, and in a better chemical, composition as you engage with your horse. And then you'll get thrown off. You'll walk in there and your horse will look at you sideways and will go, oh crap. Right. And then you'll be right back in it. Right. So it's this constant lose it, get it back, lose it, get it back, lose it, get it back.
But you have to have
so
faith.
That's where we started with.
Isn't it true with everybody?
Well,
you have to want it.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think that faith is a function of several things. I think that there's a little bit of that blind faith, like where you just gotta believe, right? But we have all these things tied into the words faith and belief, okay, that tends to make them a little mucky or murky for people. But if you feel like you have the ability to develop that skill set or those tools or connect to that or get there, or you've been there once and you can get there again, like that's where like the faith and the belief come in. And like in my work as a sports psychologist, I'm always listening for that. And I'll tell you why. It's because when I was swimming, I didn't believe, right? I didn't believe I could do it. Right. And I know my coach saw that, but didn't know how to fix that. And that wasn't her job to fix for me. But if I had had someone that could help me with that, I think I could have been better.
Is that what we call being psyched out?
Sure. I mean, that's the expression is that you psych yourself out.
You look at the swimmer next to you, you look at the rider next to you, and you're like, oh, no. She's so much better than me.
Exactly.
But I've got a question for you. What are people scared of when they are standing next to a horse? What's their number one fear?
I think that's different for most people. So philosophically, I think they're scared that they don't know how, right? That they can't, that they're not good enough, right? So if we pull it back to like this, can I, right? Like everybody kind of has the same flavor. Like there's really three kind of negative self views, and they all kind of bundle together, or like the different expressions typically come from like, I'm not good enough, I can't, I don't know how, right? And so everybody has, in my journey, I have found that everybody sort of has some version of one of those, like I'm not good enough, or I can't, or I don't deserve it.
Self-esteem.
And then right. And so then if that gets revealed, then you can go to work on that. Right. Beliefs aren't concrete walls. They're whimsical feelings and thoughts that you've just had so many goddamn times that it feels like a concrete wall, but they're not, right? We change our beliefs all the time, right? Like,
If,
I think that whatever I love, this is a terrible example, but like
yeah,
I love Alec Baldwin. He's the greatest guy in the world, best actor. Think he's terrific, wonderful, awesome.
yeah.
Then he has this accident, and whatever you think about his behavior, now you hate him. Your
Yeah,
beliefs change.
it's a paradigm. I'm going to misquote Shakespeare here. I mean, I'm going to horribly misquote him. Not, but I believe that nothing is except we think it's so. And the brain is so powerful in creating our stories, and disrupting and destroying those stories can sometimes be monumental for people. What are you afraid of?
Yes.
Failure?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a funny thing. The fear of failure, fear of success. That's a funny thing. But to think about your question, like what are people afraid of? I think that so like contextually, I think people are afraid that either they don't know how, they can't, they're not good enough, or they don't deserve it. Right. So there's that's always in the background. Then there's the foreground, which is, am I a competent enough horse person to deal with what this horse is showing me? Right. And then that's where your education, your experience, your skill set comes into play. If you're constantly working on that and looking for ways to grow that and develop that and get better and learn from new people and learn from different people, because we get stuck, like I know people who ride with one trainer for a long time. And while there are distinct benefits to that, if that is the only place you learn, you're missing out on 99% of the world of learning, unless that trainer is really into growing and learning. So it's, I think that most people are afraid to make a mistake. Most people have made the same mistake over and over again, but don't have anything new to offer to remedy that mistake. You watch it all the time. The horse does the same thing, they do the same thing. The horse does the same thing, they do the same thing. Then you have this neural pathway that's a partnership, right? We do it with people we live with, the people we traffic with all the time, people at work.
And that partnership grows, it gets stronger the more you enforce it.
Yeah. The myelination, right? So that's that fatty substance that grows over the axon, the nerve fiber, insulating the nerve signal, turning something from, a laborious, thoughtful task to an instant habitual reaction.
Right. What about pain? What about, I'm afraid of getting hurt? You ever get that?
For sure. Yeah. And that is, that's a hard one, because while we store all of our memories in our body somewhere, I put myself through graduate school doing body work and massage. And then we would always say, you have an issue in the tissue. And so we store stuff in our body, unknowingly. But then when you have an accident or an injury, then you really have good cause to be fearful and be upset. So you said something that everybody says that I always try to take up issue with, and that's overcoming fear. And so from all the research that I've done, everything I understand about brain function and how we're wired, there is no such thing as overcoming fear. Right? It's like right? Can you ever, it's a natural response. It saves your life. It is critical. I don't want anybody to overcome fear, right? It's like overcoming thirst. Where would that leave you? In big trouble, right? You have to remind you, right?
Yeah.
So, but there is a very powerful way to position the things that make you afraid.
Yeah.
So then you can think about, like in sports psychology, we talk about the difference between fear and anxiety. And so fear we define as, an appropriate response to an actual threat.
Right.
That's fear, right? Anxiety is a response to a perceived threat.
And that's why Valium works so well.
Spoken like a pro. Yeah.
Well, Valium technically brings away that anxiety, which is a perceived threat.
Right.
That isn't real. but
Yes. Yeah.
like a test you're going to take, whether it's a dressage test or a school test. God, if I don't get a good grade, oh my God, I'm never going to make it. I, all of the veterinarians out there, almost every one of them was worried that they weren't getting into vet school.
Sure.
So
or getting licensed.
Yeah, the world isn't going to end if that happens. So
no, but in that moment, that type of sentiment, typically doesn't help. So for me, the way that I approach fear with my clients is to really create a powerful way to relate to the fear. So we dismantle it, figure out what it is, like what is it, what are you afraid of, right? And it's typically not one thing. It's usually a little bit of a handful, which makes it convoluted and confusing. And so then you have to sort of tease apart and unpack the fear, like where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. It's always a thought, almost always a thought. And then that thought produces some sort of feeling or emotion. And then that emotion or feeling either takes over your body and you lose control of it or not. Okay. And so like the awareness piece is super, super critical. So once you can figure out what it is that you are afraid of, then you can come up with strategies for dealing with that. So like best example is I cannot even tell you, sadly, how many adult amateur women who have called me who have never cantered. Mm.
Wow.
Right. Non-horse people cannot get their heads around that, and 3-day eventers cannot get their heads around that. But really, there are enough women out there. There's enough proportion and percentage of women out there who are too afraid to canter, and so taking that apart and then creating the skills, right? Like it is all about capacity.
Yeah,
it is all about capacity. Like. The thing about the canter part is that it just feels different. And if you've never felt that, it throws you off. So then the first time you do it, it throws your body off. It's something unusual. You don't have anywhere to put it because it doesn't feel like trot. Sure, it certainly doesn't feel like walk. It's the horse is using his or her body differently. So then your body goes differently. And usually the reaction, not the response, but the reaction is to stop. So then you get stuck in this immediate fear-based habit. And then that becomes increasingly difficult to break without help. But you can, like you have to figure out what skills you need or are lacking. Really, like stuff like that. It sounds, I know I keep using the word skill, but it's so critical, like if you think about, like anything that you would do that has some type of physical risk, it's all about skills, and your confidence comes from your preparation and your connection to your skills. And so fear, I love to take fear from this big, huge, hairy monster into, like this reasonable thing that we can sort of take apart and then start to attack.
Yeah. People, to just add emphasis to your comment there, this takes work. And people will see me walk up to a horse I've never seen and just be very confident, and the horse just melts. That's 50 years with horses, It's going in there for 40 years, tens of thousands of horses. And here's the person who's got their first horse and they're scared. It's baby steps, right? It's small successes, one after another. But I also think it's two other things. Document the successes, write it down. I cantered 13 feet today, I didn't fall off, Yeah. And the second thing is something I've been doing for, I can't remember how long, is when I fall asleep at night, being grateful, just being grateful for the small successes I've had all day. That seems to really help me. And it's like, you know what? That didn't kill me. I succeeded. I flew for the first time, whatever it is. And once you prove to yourself that you can do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are critical points, like so critical. Like we have We have such a hard time as adults learning or not being good at something, right? Like one of my favorite quotes is from the late, lovely, amazing, brilliant Carrie Fisher, where she said, "These days, even instant gratification takes too long."
I'm stealing that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carrie.
I mean, and like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Thank you, Carrie Fisher. I mean, like that is just, and I think about, because, really woven into my job is teaching people, right? And so I work very hard to set people up to be more powerful learners because we're not very good learners.
Yeah.
We're not very good learners.
Yeah.
And when you can become a better learner, then you can learn things quicker and easier and with less resistance. But because we're adults and we think we're supposed to be great at everything immediately,
Mhm.
we really get stuck there. And horse world is really odd. Like, it's just really odd. I think that
Well,
you see this,
I think what you're saying is it's a world of people who have gotten in there late in life, not as youngsters. You and I have seen children riding with reckless abandon, no fear at all, and they just go fine. But we also see a lot of people who have waited until they're 30 before they get on, and they're not as confident. That's got to be. You have to say, okay, if you want to get in this game, I'll see you in 20 or 30, 40 years and we'll reflect back on this day. But don't reflect back on this day tomorrow because it's that instant gratification, right? It's not happening, not with horses. There's nothing instant gratification with horses until you've done your job, done your diligence. But what's fascinating is in this whole discussion that we've had, we've only been talking about people, right? We haven't even been talking about the horse.
Let's talk about the horse brain. Let's talk about it.
I mean, the brain of the horse and the brain of the human, if you look at them on the table, they look pretty similar, same size, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, if you don't know, we know that the layers are different, but there are islands in there that you've got the limbic system, cerebral cortex. And what I find fascinating is the connections, I think, with horses are so similar to humans, at least I think so. Maybe not anatomically speaking, but we can reach into some of these horses and ask them to think and build new connections. I'll give you an example. I walk up to a horse that says, I hate men and I hate vets. And I sit there with my hand up in the air and like, talk to the hand. Well, there's a camera. Talk to the hand. And then I do like Robin Williams says. He says, talk to the hand, call waiting. He flips the hand over and says, let's build a new story. I'm not that vet. I'm not that man. I love women who've been divorced and they say, I hate all men. I'm like, well, where are you going to be now? I mean, what if the right man comes by? Like, I'm not that man. So we have to build our stories a little bit better. And I think the horse is receptive to that. So if you've got some insight, just let's do some comparative anatomy maybe, or, thought anatomy. Help me out here.
So that is a great way to think about it. So anatomically, the horse brain and the human brain. Yeah. So the horse brain is like the size of a large grapefruit, right? So it's a lot bigger than most people think. I've heard historically it's the size of an avocado pit, and it's bigger than that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, from what I've read, like a large grapefruit. So it's pretty big, and yes, so the lower brain. So that's, if you want to learn about the layers of the brain, it's called the triurnal, urnal brain, right? Okay. That's the 3 layers of the brain that I mentioned earlier.
Right.
So the horse's lower brain, their reptile brain, the big bulb in the back of our head, if you've ever seen like a brain model, is called the cerebellum. And that is a critical brain part for horses. And it's like 2/3 of the horse's brain is cerebellum, right? Which is all proprioception, patterns, memory, balance. That's the goods that keeps like prey animals alive, right? And so they're born pre-wired, and then it takes a couple of weeks for all those connections to really kind of come to life so that a horse looks like it's pretty ready to go. Like your baby horses run around and you can't catch them, and you're like, how is this possible? You're a month old, So, but the human brain, the cerebellum, is 1/5. So considerably smaller, because most of the bulk of our brain is our frontal lobe, right? And so this is where the difference comes in. But the limbic system, which is the middle part of the brain, the emotional brain, where the autonomic nervous system lives and where most of our chemicals, like the distribution, like, secrete that hormone, do that neurotransmitter, do that chemical. That is really the center of our brain. Our limbic system is where that the sort of the maestro, like the orchestra conductor for that. Same thing in the horse. The main difference is the frontal lobe piece, right? So they talk about the horse's frontal lobe as being not very advanced, and it's like less than 10% of the mass in the horse's brain, whereas our prefrontal cortex, our cerebral cortex, neocortex, is 40% of our brain. So we have developed these capacities for discovery, curiosity, abstract thinking, and connections in a very different way, plus our language abilities, right? So the more you use a muscle, the bigger it gets, right? And so humans have language capacity based on our vocal cords and the muscles in our tongue. Like primates don't have the same musculature in their mouths and their throats and their vocal cords that humans do. So we develop language differently, right? So we have all these language abilities. So this part of our brain went poof as we develop language. And then thought, and so it's sort of like out of necessity, right? Our brains developed into the way that it is out of necessity. Now, horses have this limbic system, so we can connect with them. Like there is not much better than walking in the barn and your horse sticks its head out of its stall, or you walk past the paddock and they pop their head up from grazing, see you, and nick or whinny or come to you, right? I mean, like, right? That is like that.
I know so many women who say it's so much better than the husband because he never looks up.
So we have this ability to connect with our horses because all mammals survive in tribes, packs, herds, whatever it is, because that's better for survival. So we're wired that way because it keeps us alive longer. So the functioning of the equine brain, like there's a lot less junk in the way to learning. So horses actually learn like wicked fast, but we don't realize that because a lot of times what we're intending for them to learn, they don't learn because we're not applying our learning techniques correctly, or their prey drive gets in the way, and because they shift into survival mode very, very quickly because they can't look at a stall mat, right? Like I read somewhere, your horse sleeps on his stall mat every single night in his stall. You take that exact same stall mat and you put it out in the field and he will be sure it's going to eat him, right? They can't transfer that. Yep. So they're constantly thinking about what's going to hurt them or kill them. Yeah. And a painful or dangerous experience for a horse creates a neural pathway immediately. Same thing for us. You say, I love you, yep, when you're 6 years old to your neighbor, and he or she laughs at you, and you go, all right, I love you's a bad deal. That really hurt. Never going to say that again. Right. And so boom, you've got a neural pathway created, and then you spend the rest of your life strengthening that. So horses have this really super rapid response to stuff because they're so acutely aware of the environment in a very different way than humans are. We don't notice the things, right? And then we also misinterpret. I think that a lot of the stuff that we're learning about the equine brain, like even yesterday, I was talking to a horse trainer who just loves the crap out of their horses. I mean, like walks, talks, eat, breathes, sleeps, loves horses. But the horse was doing something, and the trainer said, yeah, that horse is just stupid. Right now, it wasn't because it was only because that's our culture. Right.
Yeah.
So we have this 250-year culture of horses are stupid. They've got a tiny little brain.
Yep.
They're dumb. And anytime, that the horses, and I'm like, I didn't see anything because it would have been like unraveling the whole thing. But horses don't have the cognitive capacity for so many of the things we blame them for. Right. He's not being belligerent. He's not being an ass. He's not being mean. He's not putting up a fight. He's not trying to wreck your day. He doesn't sit in the stall or in the paddock overnight and try to develop ways to make your life miserable because they just don't have the cognitive capacity for it. It's like children, it'd be like saying the same thing about a 6-year-old kid. They're trying to sabotage my future. No, they're not.
Right. Yeah.
They're not thinking about your future.
Yeah.
Like, so we don't, like, I'm constantly ringing that bell for people. Like, no, the horse doesn't have the brain for that. That's not possible for them. Right. And when people can start to think about their horse's brain and capacity, realistically, I see it change things for them immediately.
Yeah.
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Well, they don't have the wiring to be mean. They can be mean, right? You be mean to a horse long enough, your horse will be mean. Promise. Right? Mm-hmm. But, they're not planning how to be mean to you. They see you and they react. Or they see whoever, the male vet.
Yeah.
And they react.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. What do they have a good capacity for? In other words, you've touched on energy and they can feel your energy. It seems like they're really good at that. Where does that come from?
So I don't know the science on that, but my guess is that if you think about human neuroplasticity, right? So neuroplasticity is the ability for the brain to change. Right. So these are super dynamic abilities. So the way that most people think about it is someone goes blind and their hearing becomes sharper. Okay. Right. Like that's kind of so now what neuroscientists originally thought was, so we go blind, all of those neurons in the occipital visual cortex become part of the auditory cortex. Well, that's not what happens. What happens is the auditory cortex goes, right? So it those cells, those neurons and nerves and that part of the brain expand out of necessity, right? So you can't see, so that energy has to be taken over somewhere else. So a horse can't think in the same way that humans can. So it has to be much more clever in terms of awareness for safety. Mm-hmm. And humans are so clueless about their body language. It's amazing, right? Like I guess I fashion myself as a body language expert being a psychologist. So now, am I an expert? Are there people that are better? 100%. But I love to watch people and they miss, like we all have little tiny tells that we give clues, right? Yeah. Like you're sitting, you're talking to someone and, they cross their arms. Well, sure. Why?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. They fiddle with something or, that's why in-person sessions are so valuable because you watch what happens to somebody when you say something. You experiment, say something to someone that they're not expecting and watch what their body does. Yeah. And I think because horses don't have that part of the brain to interpret our spoken language the way that we do between humans, they interpret our physical language. And there is a vibrational output. There's research on this that our different energetic emotional states have different vibrational frequency handshakes. Yeah. Right. So, when someone walks in the room and they're pissed off, right?
Sure.
Even if you don't know them,
or
even if you don't know them, right? You watch their.
Yep.
right? They
Yeah.
was, you know, or someone's like in the best mood ever, right? Or
Yeah.
someone's sad and hiding it, you know, like, but horses are expert at that because they don't have all the other garbage in the way because they can't go, I wonder if they got a flat tire on the way here. I wonder if they got a letter from the IRS. I wonder if they're going to fight with that spouse person they're always whining about while we're riding. They can't do that. They have to pick up on different cues. They have, you know, like you'll watch horses in a herd together and they are so sensitive to any movement, any movement. And I think that's where their acuity and their responsiveness comes from, is out of, you know, they don't have all this junk where they're making stuff up in their head. They're really looking for, what are you telling me without telling me?
Where does a horse, or where do we register time? I mean, we have the old, you know, past, present, and future down cold. Where's the horse sit in that?
Oof. You know, I don't know if I've ever really thought about that. And that's so interesting because I had a really cool conversation. Meta and I and a friend who's here visiting had a really cool conversation about time this morning, like this morning,
Wow.
because yeah, because I'm a I meditate, and I don't know, what do I call it? A serious meditator, an advanced meditator, a long time meditator, and I like believe it or not, like the sweet spot, the amount of time that I absolutely love to meditate is about 90 minutes. And
That's a long
and
time.
my friend,
To me, that seems like
is it?
give me
Right.
5
Yeah. And
minutes,
that's what
man.
everybody said.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what everybody says, you know. But when you, as you progress, as I have progressed time, like length of time wise into my meditative practice, time just changes. Like I sit down, you know, like I start between 5 and 5:30 every morning because it's like
Yeah.
it works. It makes my life work. It makes me tolerable. It makes me better
Isn't that interesting?
everywhere in my world. Right. And so I sit down and I get up and it's 6:30 or 7 and it's light out and I take my eye shades off. I wear eye shades when I do it so that I'm not distracted. And I'm like, wow, that was fast. You know, like, because it doesn't, once, like, as I've worked so hard to train my brain to get to these different, you know, like the idea in meditation is to impact your wavelength, like the, you know, are you in beta, alpha, theta wavelength,
Yeah.
wavelength state. And so that impacts our relationship, that impacts the human relationship to time, because the shorter, faster your wavelength, your brain wavelength, the longer things seem, right?
Yeah.
When you slow down and lengthen out your brain, it's like the flow state. And this is what we were talking about this morning. Like remember in the 80s, it was the zone.
Yeah.
Can you get an athlete into the zone? Or I have like 5 books on that from the 80s. Then Chica and he just passed away. The guy, the authority on flow, right? And flow state really describes this sort of, you know, like alpha theta brainwave state, which is a higher, slower frequency.
That's what we all go through in sleep, right?
Right. That's the gateway to sleep, is, you know, out when you're sort of drifting off and you kind of realize you're drifting off. Right. And so and I was thinking about that. I was going to ask you if you'd ever seen any I'm sure that there's zero brainwave research on horse brain frequency, but that would be the interesting thing, you know, like horses know when it's 4 o'clock, when they're about to be fed, you know, like they're creatures of habit, but it's not because of the clock. It's, you know, it's because of whatever rhythm they're in.
Sure.
So I don't know that I could even begin to answer how time exists for an equine. But I would imagine that when they are in a state of connection and when things are good and when they have serotonin and even oxytocin, and maybe even a tiny bit of cortisol from the good cortisol from exercise, that time would take on a different element for them. And that, you know, like I think horses like you watch a horse go through a great workout or have a great ride, and and they look happy, like I talk to a lot of 3-day eventers, and they're like, the 5-star level, you can't do it unless your horse loves it. And that's so hard for me as a whatever to get my head around. Okay, the horse loves us, but I'll tell you, there are definitely some things that I do with my horse that I know he loves. Right.
Yep.
And I think there are those moments like with humans, maybe, and I'm just sort of thinking out loud, that time changes for them when we have that kind of engagement. I don't know. What do you think?
You mentioned way in the beginning about having agendas. We have an hour to ride, or in an hour I must leave because I've got to pick up the kid, or the husband's coming home, the wife's coming home, whatever. When I walk into a stall, you said that I don't have an agenda. And I think if I were going to rephrase that, I get in the moment. I don't have a rush. I feel what the rhythm is of the horse. If the horse is like, oh, it's you, Doc. I love you. Come on in. Things are easy. Bum, 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 bum. Then we have other horses like, who do you think you are? You're a man, you're a vet. We're going to have an issue here. And that's when I have to stop. And there is no beginning and no end, which is the definition of time, basically, is having a beginning and an end. And I just am there. And when I am there, then there's nothing else. I mean, you'll hear me talking like I'm using my right hand, but my left hand is talking to the horse. And I've developed this ability, like the right and left hand of a piano player that can be independent. I can split that. And when I'm with a horse, I'm just like paying 100% attention to him. And when that happens, most horses are like, no human pays 100% attention to me. And they get into a moment where they are deeply listening, and I'm deeply listening to them. And it can be, if you want to put it on a stopwatch, less than a second. It can be instantaneous. Some, it has to be earned, and that trust level is low and it works to being high. And I'm lucky because I can go in there and take pain away inside their mouth, and they're like, whoa, where have you been all my life? Whereas if I were coming in to jab them with a vaccine, I'm earning that trust, and bam, in comes a sharp needle. Yeah, I've lost that trust. So there's tons of different things that we can talk about. But if I'm not in the moment and listening and being 100% attention, which means time is gone. Now I have a clock rhythm in here that I have to do so many horses because I got another barn to go to. But when I was at your place the other day, I didn't care about getting home. I didn't care about, where I had to be next. I was there in the moment with the horses and with you and with the help and the dogs, or chickens. I don't care. If you're not in the moment, you're not a horse. And if you're not a horse, then you can never connect with them, I think. And a lot of people come in, like you said, they have an agenda. The agenda is layered with fears, anxieties, other thoughts that are unrelated, like at work. And so how many people come to the barn and they say, this is my therapy. I don't want to talk politics. I don't want to talk anything. This is my therapy time. And yes, it is therapy, but remember, you're also the therapist for the horse. The horse just isn't your therapist. It goes both ways. And I can't tell you how many times Melissa and I have gone into a barn and the horses are like, please just put me in your car and get me out of this place. It's amazing. They are so grateful for our moments there. Say, please don't leave me. And that is the saddest day. Whereas other barns will walk in and they're like, oh yeah, we're fine. And they're just like, could care less. They're so happy. Like you say, they're absolutely happy where they are. And I don't know if that has something with time. I think it does. The middle brain, that limbic system, I think it has a lot to do with the emotional connections to the motor cortex and like the fight or flight and cortisol, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. I mean, all these hormones and neurotransmitters are all like, And I don't think any horse owner wants to know how to spell serotonin. I don't think they care. You know, they want to know what to do when they step into that stall to make that connection, to be in the present moment with that horse, and to overcome their fears, worries, doubts, and concerns, and have a willing partner. And that's the thing that I keep asking you and everybody. What can we do? I mean,
so it's fabulous the way that you describe being present, and any Eastern philosophy, the idea behind meditation, right, for many cultures is to be able to connect in the present moment, right? Like you hear this all over, like be present, can you be present? Right. And then how many years ago was it? It was like 4 or 5 years ago, Harvard published that study, which said that human beings spend 47% of the time thinking about something else. Right. So half the things someone says to you, or half the things you say to someone else, they're not hearing, they're not paying, because, the human brain thinks a thought a second, only one thought at a time, but 90% of the thoughts we think are the same thoughts we had the day before, which creates the same day, the next day after. Yada, yada, yada. But with the present like that, and that's a skill set, that's a tool, that's a muscle to build, to being present. And I'm listening to you talk about being connected to the horse and walking in there and being like so not laser focused because it doesn't have that element to it, but your pure agenda. I didn't say you didn't have an agenda. I said you have a very pure agenda, which is, like, this is my job. This is my calling. This is my heart to come in here and help you.
Yep.
Right. That's why you became a veterinarian, right? Not for the lifestyle and all the money you'd make, but really that presence is something that we lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
we
definitely
lose it over time.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, but that drives so you had these moments where you were present with a horse and you're like, that's the keys to the kingdom. Right. And so then in your 50 years of practice, you've developed that so that it's like a skill. It's like, Tiger Woods picking up a golf club for you, right? It's like wired, right? Heavily wired, heavily myelinated, right? Hebb's law, not neurons that fire together, wire together. You've done this so many times, right? That it's really, really easy for you. But then the woman who's afraid of her horse, or who's having trouble at work, or trouble in her relationship, or not so confident, right? All of those thoughts are competing for airtime.
Yeah.
Right. And if you can center yourself into those passionate thoughts that you have, that's the place to start, right? Like you put yourself aside and you put whatever it is you're trying to be present with ahead.
Yeah.
And when you can connect to that, then that creates the draw. And then you continue to develop the muscles for that. Like, to become present is an art. It's a skill set. It is work. Right.
And you've got a partner. Remember, you're not alone. You're not alone.
True. Your horses will help you more than any human.
Well, I think the horse is there to help you. I don't think every horse can help every person. I think there are mismatches out there. I think a lot of people are overfaced, and you have to find the right horse. But I think with a coach like you, you can help the person realize that the horse could be that therapist for you, that thing that draws out of you into that moment of connection. I think that would be a beautiful thing.
So could I ask you a favor? To call the horse a partner instead of a therapist, because when people begin to relate to the horse like a therapist, they begin to expect something and then demand something from them. Like, I'm supposed to feel better.
I couldn't agree more. I tell
everyone,
you're not
making me feel better.
The horse is not your therapist, your lover, your best friend, anything. In fact,
it's your horse.
It's a horse. And if you don't treat it like a horse, you're disrespecting it. No different than if I called you a female animal, female dog, maybe. Right? And that makes you feel uncomfortable. And so You called me out on that. I'm so grateful that you did, because I don't look at the horse as a therapist. The horse is my therapist. A horse is a reflection of you. There's no doubt about it. And it's up to you to realize, and you become your own therapist and say, okay, what am I reading? How can I adjust me? And the horse will come to you and reflect back to you exactly what you're giving them. That's what I see. So yeah, willing partner, beautiful. There's nothing more beautiful than that. A 1,200-pound beast coming up and just touching you lightly with the nose, saying thank you. And by the way, that's a word we don't say to our horses enough. Like you said, you stupid, what are you thinking? How would you like to be talked to that way? How about thank you? Thank you for trying.
Yeah. I used to take these clients. I used to bring out a natural horsemanship trainer from Texas, Sharon Lindy. I'll never forget her. And she taught me a couple of things that are with me to this day when I'm with my horse and even with my dog. But she used to play this game called Best Horse in the Pen. And, she was a Western cowgirl. And so Pen, it was, but we'd be in, all of us with our dressage or jumper horses in this clinic. And when your horse did something great, the game was you go best horse in the pen, and I'm constantly doing that, the great part of it is that every single horse is the best horse in the pen. Right.
Always.
And I think that makes it, and she always thanked her horse when she got off, like, thank you for the ride. Thank you for the play. Thank you for the graze. Thank you for the snuggle. Thanks for taking that, whatever. So you're right on with that. And I take that ever, like my dog, you met Coco the other day, and, I'm constantly saying, best dog in the world, best dog ever, best dog ever. And like, he changes, like we'll be walking and he's like walking along and he's got some greyhound in him. So his ears go straight back, like in a good way. And I was like, oh, God, you're the best. And I go, cool looking. Like you can feel him like there's so much, like when someone says you're the best ever, like what does that do to you? When someone thanks you, so I think you are spot on. I love that. And, even if people just take that away from this conversation, you
and I are thinking so much alike right now. If you got nothing out of this, learn how to say thank you to your partner, to your pets, to the guy that you don't even know behind the counter at 7-Eleven.
Yeah, there's your gratitude for you.
I said to one guy, it literally 7-Eleven somewhere in Syosset, Long Island. I left Melissa out in the car to fill up the tank. I went inside and got her candy bars. and I said to the guy, thank you so much. I said, where are you from? And he says, India. I said, oh my gosh, you have like the longest lived democracy. I mean, you're so far away from home. So it must be so amazing for you to be here. Thank you for coming to America and just being part of us, welcome. So I walk out to the car. I'm in the car. Melissa says, uh-oh, what'd you do? I look up and
he's coming out.
He's running out to my car. And I'm not afraid. I roll down the window. He sticks his head in. He says, I've got to thank you so much for just saying what you said and being who you are. Thank you. You've made my day. That's what a horse can do. And you just do it to strangers. Practice on everybody you see. Open the door, or somebody opens the door for you, say thank you. And then take that to your horse. Thank you. Don't say zip the lip without just one word. Thank you. Gosh, Dr. Jenny, you'd be out of a job if everyone just did that one thing, right?
I'd happily be out of a job. I would happily find other work to do. Believe me.
Yeah.
If that happens.
How do you handle the same thing over and over and over again? In other words, what does Dr. Jenny do besides meditate?
Well, so what do you mean by the same thing over and over again, that somebody calls with the same issue?
Yeah. Because this is everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so first of all, the thing that I am passionate about is people having access to being better. And I say that intentionally, like having access to being better. I think that people want to be better. right? Like we're driven to be better, like better people, better owners, better performers, better spouses, better whatever we want to be better at. Like I think
Right.
we're driven to be better. What I think is that most people don't have access
Hmm.
to how to be better, right? And
Yeah.
so every person is different. And when someone calls me or I do a workshop or whatever I'm doing, I'm always thinking about what do they need access to be better. And so that's always one of the lenses I listen through. And we're often stopped. And so for me, that's always the unraveling that I'm doing. Like, okay, what do I need to learn or have more access to so that I can be better?
Yeah.
Like how to, and so I really think that's how humans are wired. Like, I think that we're driven for that kind of thing. And when we don't have access to it or we get stopped, we get really upset. Like, I think so many people are so upset because they've either given up on that they can be better, or they've just run into so many dead ends that, they're resigned to where they are.
We're told they run
And
into dead ends. You'll never make it. You're such a loser.
yeah,
Wow.
like man, when I
So
hear stories like that,
you're a door opener. And you go into people's minds and say, have you looked behind this door? No, I didn't know. And you open up possibilities for people. That is so cool.
wow.
It's not the same thing. I was wrong to ask that question. I think every person is going to be completely different with similarly rooted, but different stories. And your job is to like tease away all these stories and gain access to what trauma occurred in their past to help them get over that. That is so cool. That
You know
is so
what,
cool.
Geoff, you and I we're like the same. We're in the same. We're all ice cream. Like you and I are both ice cream. We're just different flavors, right? You do like I'm listening to you describe what I do, and I'm thinking that's exactly what you do with the horses you take care of. Like exactly. Like someone could say to you, how do you do horses all day? Right? All day, every day. Like it's just a mouth. There's how many teeth? And I mean, you have 3 different tools. Like, God, aren't you bored to tears?
Mentally
But
exhausted. Mentally exhausted.
but it's really there's something, because we're so individually different. That's what makes it so exciting, whether I'm working with someone one-on-one or in a group. It doesn't really matter because all of that doesn't matter.
It
So,
doesn't matter. Also,
that's a cool question. I appreciate you asking that.
doesn't matter if the horse has won the Kentucky Derby or belongs to a little girl with pigtails in a pigsty. I've done them all. You've worked at every level of athlete. But the brain is the brain. And there are challenges, and you just got to whittle through it. Very few people have ice for blood. As one Pan American dressage rider told me when I said, "Oh, you're going to the Pan American Games?" She says, "Yep." I said, "You must be nervous." She says, "Nope." I said, "Really?" She says, "No, I have ice for blood." I'm like, God, that's kind of cool.
Did she win?
It was so long ago, but I think she was right up there. I've known a gold medal winner, and she pretty much had ice for blood. Yeah. It's their ability to control that.
Yeah, I think that I think ice for blood is a dramatic way to describe a really finely tuned focus muscle. That would be my guess.
And very rare. Very rare.
Well, I think naturally rare.
Naturally rare.
Most people have to work pretty hard to become really good competitors once you get to whatever your top level is, right? Not everybody's top level is the Pan Ams or the Olympic Games, right? But whatever your top, where you see your top ability, capacity, talent, all of those things, whatever, once you get to that level, whether it's high school, college,
Right.
professional, international, whatever level you compete at. When you get to that top level, your mental game is the thing that teases out, are you on the podium or not?
So it's not the medal, it's the inner goal that the person has, overcoming their fears and growing. I think if everyone's growing, they're not dying. And I think that so many people need your help just to let them know that they're not dying, they're growing. And just to canter is such an accomplishment for so many.
For many, for sure. There's, like, I think so many people need help is really a tough way of saying, like, we can all continue to grow and you can find that piece that you're missing to help you be better. Right. And it's not always a big piece. Sometimes it's a really tiny piece. Like, you have all these other pieces, and sometimes you just need that one, and it links together all this other stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of people think like it's, like they're missing something giant. And sometimes I'll say, I don't even know how many clients where I've said one thing, and then you can hear it. You can hear their head going, oh, okay, gotta go, click. And they never call me again, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it was, it helped that they linked together whatever that one thing was, that all the other work they had done, right? Everybody who's listening to this has done a ton of work.
Yeah.
Right. So you just keep looking for those links.
Yeah.
That's it. Right.
Well, Jenny, I know who I'm going to call. We all get those blocks sometimes, in everything in life. And you're obviously passionate about what you want to do. Every time we meet in the barn, we're like, get out of my way. Let's talk, brains.
I know. When you were here time before last and I couldn't come to the barn, I was so mad. I was like, ah, Doc's here and I can't go talk to him and find out what podcast he's listening to or what book he just read. I appreciate your super thirst for learning, and it always inspires me.
Well, thank you for being there. I appreciate you. drjenny.com, if you ever want to look her up. She's amazing. What do you do? I mean, briefly, you coach, you give lectures, you support, you train. What do you want these listeners to know about you at drjenny.com? Is there anything? I know you're a very humble person. I get it. But
well, I think that finding out about me is relatively easy. I have a lot of stuff. On Facebook. It's I think it's just Dr. Jenny Susser on Facebook, and I have a lot of stuff there. I just launched a new online course called Empty Tank Syndrome. Shameless plug. And it's just empty tank syndrome. Empty, like our tanks are empty. It's all about energy.
Yeah.
And having the energy to dig out. Like, the tagline is why resilience is not enough, right? Because we've all become incredibly resilient. And what's that gotten us?
Yeah.
Further exhaustion.
Yes.
So this is like really the anti-burnout, anti-exhaustion model that I've worked on with athletes and corporate teams for a decade.
Yeah.
And so that I finally put it together in a course. So, but there's lots of easy ways to find out about me and see if there's a fit or something I can do for you.
There is a beautiful website. I recommend everybody go to drjenny.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been awesome.
Doc, it is always great to talk to you, but then to do it publicly. I hope this makes a difference for somebody.
Okay. I'm going to hit the record button and unrecord us. And thank you all for joining us today. Bye. Hey, everyone. Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There are two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me.
And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.